So next on the agenda is our keynote speaker. I'm delighted to welcome Deirdre Schlunegger from Stop Foodborne Illness. Deirdre is the CEO of Stop Foodborne Illness, an organization dedicated to the prevention of illness and death from foodborne pathogens by advocating for sound public policy, building public awareness, and assisting those impacted by foodborne illness. Deirdre serves as an advisory member as well of the Joint Institute for Food Safety and Nutrition, JIFSAN, and as a participating member of the Safe Food Coalition and the Make Our Food Safe Coalition. She serves as a commissioner of International Food Science Certification Commission. She also has 25 years of varied nonprofit experience with many other organizations and causes. Welcome, Deirdre.
So thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity and appreciate being here. I am going to be talking to you about stories of people who've been impacted by foodborne illness, but I wanted to thank all of you for what you do and for your commitment to food safety and for making a difference. It's so important. And I also want to apologize in advance. I've had an upper respiratory infection for 2 weeks, so I'm hoping to get through this without making you too miserable and listening to my raspy voice. So we're going to first see a video that was, it's done by the Leafy Green Marketing Agreement. And by Stop Foodborne Illness, we came together a few years ago to put this together. So I wanted to show you the video that will, I think, give us a good start to the presentation. So let's see if I can do this right.
I'm proud to be part of the LGMA. We are doing things the right way. We have a moral obligation to our families to keep them healthy. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
How are you doing?
Great.
I'm really glad you guys came out because I've shared your stories.
Thank you.
You're getting to me again. Because they need to know. I tell Riley's story a lot. When I do trainings, when I talk to my staff, I tell Riley's story. It's a story that I tell because I want other people to hear it. I need other people to understand that this is why we do what we do. This is why food safety is important. This is why we go to the efforts that we go to.
You know, Riley was 9, just your average little girl. I got sick 2 days after my birthday, so I got sick on a weekend.
I was just starting my junior year of college and I had a spinach salad. It was delicious. And about 3 days later, I started feeling like I had the flu.
I started having really bad pain, and it wasn't just like stomach pain. I felt something was wrong, but I didn't know what was really happening.
And then within 4 days or so, 5 days, I was hemorrhaging.
Within hours, I started to have diarrhea. I just had bloody stools right after a few hours.
I hurt all over. I had body aches. I kept going to the bathroom. I had a low-grade fever.
I felt like someone was stabbing me in the stomach.
And then when I went to the urgent care center, the doctor came up, and when she came into the exam room, she touched my side, and I screamed.
Kidney failure and loss of vision, loss of hearing, swelling around her brain, swelling around her heart. It was really emotional for me because I thought the world was collapsing, and I thought I pretty knew that I was gonna die because of how bad I felt.
I remember thinking that it was rock bottom when you're in college and you're 20 years old and your mom has to feed you and then put you in the shower and wash you.
I wasn't gaining any weight. I felt really lethargic. I wasn't growing appropriately. My doctor said that I was diagnosed with diabetes. I just have a damaged pancreas because of the E. coli. So I went through a lot.
it changed a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. And so in some ways, I'm still learning ways that it's changed me.
But now we're pushing ourselves to do more. So what does that mean? We train a little harder? We train more? I'm a little bit harder on a deficiency. Maybe I need to explain better. Maybe I take more time to explain why we're doing things.
Getting to know the farmers and everything, I feel like my food is more safe. I know that they're trying to do their best, and I'm very thankful for that.
We're doing everything we can to prevent this from happening again. There's never going to be a guarantee that it won't. But there's always a guarantee that we are doing everything within our control, within our knowledge, within our education, within the matrix of the LGMA to prevent this from happening again.
And I do think that they genuinely want this culture of food safety. I genuinely think that they want to embody it and move forward and make improvements year after year and look at the system as a whole.
It's important to me people and have safe food on the table.
These people are growing from their hearts, and they grow for their family. Like, everything they eat is from their farm.
I certainly wouldn't be sending anything out that I wouldn't eat myself.
They came in not knowing what we really do as part of the LGMA program. But we shared that information with each other, and I think we both came out stronger for it. I can't tell you how, for me personally, how emotional this was. It makes me want to do more. And I want others to feel the same, because it's so important. And the moment we all get inspired to do more is the time where we're all doing what we need to be doing.
Thank you. So this video, the video that you just saw, have any of you seen it before? A couple of people have seen it before. It really speaks to the why behind food safety, and it's a culmination of several meetings that we had between Stop Foodborne Illness and LGMA. And the project came about after the 2006 spinach outbreak, and after the leafy and green marketing agreement folks really concentrated their efforts on sustainable changes in order to avoid additional trauma to their industry and, of course, to consumers as well. And they called me and asked me if I would come out for a visit, and I went and watched a field audit and then met with the LGMA staff. And the second visit was with Stop Foodborne Illness, other members, and people who went with us who had losses in their family due to foodborne illness. And then the third visit where we went out was really a visit that deepened our connection with a larger group of farmers, farm owners, farm managers, groups of individuals who had been sick. And we spent full 2 days sharing stories and sharing our narratives, visiting farms, processors, getting to know one another, appreciating each other's perspectives and histories. And we all came to the table with a bit of apprehension and anxiety, but I felt like we really left as comrades. In fact, I remember the day that I was leaving to go out there, I got a call from their PR person who said, I just wonder if we should be afraid. And I said, afraid of what? And she said, well, you know, afraid you're going to be like really mad at us or angry at us. And I said, no, of course not. And so it was interesting. So this video tells the story of the outcome of those visits, and we learned a lot from one another's experiences and understood our diverse cultures, and it really opened us up to dialogue. So we all have multiple roles in our lives and our experiences that frame our perspectives and our beliefs and our values. And our identities aren't just about where we were born or where we work, but They were created over time and influenced by our experiences in the world, the relationships that we have, and our faiths, our families, our histories, our peers, and the organizations. All of those count. The narratives we constructed about ourselves and about others are shaped by our personal stories and emotions, and changes to our narratives often only occur when there's a crisis or incentive to change, something that's in front of us. And this applies to business cultures as well. Our personal views and our beliefs about food safety and about the influence we have and the actions that we take. So the young girl in this picture is Lauren, and Lauren was the first child who died from the 1993 West Coast E. coli 0157 outbreak. She had gone to a restaurant and had 3 bites of a hamburger and became very ill within a few days and died. And her family lives were changed forever, as were their perspectives of the world around them. So although I don't know many of you in the room, I suspect you all come from different backgrounds and you engage in many roles in your life. You're like me, we're all consumers, right? You have diverse experiences and values, and there's no doubt that there's diversity in what you care about in your work and in your personal lives. And just by the fact that you're here at this conference tells me that you care deeply about food safety. Think about your work and what brought you here, and your beliefs and why you came to this conference, and think about why food safety is important to you. You were told a little bit about our mission before. So who is Stop Foodborne Illness, and what do we care about? Well, we started in 1993 after the West Coast E. coli 0157 outbreak, in which 4 children died and hundreds were ill. And the organization was created by friends and parents of children who died. And it was a sad beginning. Early on, the parents went to Washington, they marched, they met with legislators, and the founders were grieving and they were angry. The people leading the organization were involved in shaping and advocating for HACCP and in many other initiatives all the way up to FSMA. And the organization has changed and matured over time, but we've always cared deeply about the people who have lost family members or who have had very ill family members sick from foodborne illness. So we give a voice to those who've had personal experience and those who've really had unbearable pain. And in the last few years, we've looked for ways to be highly collaborative and influential as we look for even more meaningful ways of making a difference and finding solutions to food safety. And some of the ways we engage are by participating in company food safety trainings, participating in conferences and panel discussions, creating videos for companies, presenting at conferences like this, sending out food safety-related e-alerts to consumers, and by sharing tips with consumer safety. So we've done a video with Kroger Foods, all 400,000 of their employees see before they start work. We've done some video projects with Wegmans Foods and of course with LGMA and some others. And we know that exposure to foodborne pathogens can happen anywhere, right along the line, from growing or processing all the way up through consumer handling. And we amplify our messaging through our e-alerts, through our newsletters, and our stories about professionals and individuals who are really making a difference. And just like you, we come to the table with a diverse set of experiences, and as do our volunteers. Our volunteers are all individuals who grieve differently, and they all feel differently about the food and the pathogens and the companies that were implicated in the illness. So we like to see ourselves as part of a solution, and we believe by giving voice to the stories that we have an impact on food safety by exposing employees to the narratives of individuals who've experienced foodborne illness. So, as I've mentioned earlier, the collective stories we tell about ourselves become part of our personal narrative and affect how we see ourselves and others. The 2 young children in this slide are Serena on your left and Anna Lee, who died in 2002. Serena died about 3 years ago, and they both died from E. coli from a food source. There's a predominance of thought in our Western world and Western minds that suggests that understanding the world is essentially objective. But in practice, there's really no such thing as objective, and everything we see is through our particular historical lens and our experiences in the world, including our work. And this particular lens can often lead to profound misunderstandings and misreadings. And this is particularly true when we're trying to understand a culture or belief that's different from our own. Well-intentioned interventions can go catastrophically wrong when cultural nuances are understood or not understood, and judgments are made while looking through our own lens. And I think this is an important concept when thinking about our work, and we encourage everyone to look through the lens of the family member and simply not the bottom line of the economic lens. So empathy, the word empathy. When I use the word, I'm not talking about sympathy or agreeing with another person. We may not like the behavior of another person, or we may feel uncomfortable with their value system, but the way we make decisions, seldom involves getting into the mind of another person, and the calculations are seldom based on a deeper understanding of the human mind. We have a tendency to disregard the history and culture of others, and so our challenge is really to extend our moral imagination not only to those who we agree with, but also with different views of the world, so that insight is possible. And that's what happened when LGMA came together with Stop and we had discussions. And this, of course, demands at least a little degree of self-awareness and requires the development of an outside view of our behavior and values so that we can metabolize our own emotions in a way that help us connect with other people's stories like the ones that I'm sharing, and to have a deeper understanding of their pain and experience. And this is why we think it's important to share the stories. Outbreaks are, of course, also impact companies who've been implicated in outbreaks, and who they may face also economic and cultural crisis. So, as I said, this was true for everyone at the beginning of the relationship between LGMA and Stop when we came together, and we're very nervous to be together, and we now have mutually respectful and a really deeper understanding of our unique perspective. So what incentivizes the human spirit, and how do we draw on people's creativity and ability to have empathy and to solve problems? Which interventions are more or less likely to stimulate our ability to care about food safety as it relates to human beings? And what would create a sound food safety culture? Knowing or knowledge alone, as we know, seldom changes behavior. Our imagination benefits from stimulation, as in listening to personal stories. And as for change to happen, an emotional connection to a notion of an achievable goal could change lives and outcomes. I've seen this happen over and over again in my 7.5 years as CEO of Stop Foodborne Illness. And two examples come to mind and are quite opposite one another. This past year we spoke, I think maybe it was a little more than a year ago at Smithfield Foods, and we had a pre-conference call about the presentation and what it was going to look like. And one of the men on the conference call said that more than 20 years ago, he heard Nancy Donnelly speak about the death of her son, Alex, who died from E. coli at the age of 6. And he said he has never looked at food safety the same way since that time, and that he takes every single infraction of food safety as a possible consequence of someone's life. And I've actually heard this a number of times from a number of people. But then in another example, when I was sitting across from a woman in a meeting who works for a large food association, we were talking about prevention, and she laughed and said to me, well, you know, you take a risk every time you cross the street, every time you go out into the world, that's just life. And I thought, well, you know, her self-awareness seems kind of low and defense is kind of high, and maybe it's just too painful for her to acknowledge the consequences of, food safety in the world. So the people in this slide, Nancy Donnelly, Riley, who you met in the video, and Jeff Ulmer have all made a difference. Jeff lost his mother to foodborne illness. It was actually the peanut butter outbreak. His mother had overcome cancer and a number of other things, and and really, really loved peanut butter and had peanut butter crackers, and she died from that outbreak. Nancy, whose son Alex died, and Riley's story you heard. So a rational understanding of what a better outcome might look like will often involve a deeper understanding and connection with an issue and with the individual linked to that issue. And Frank Yanis, in his book about food safety culture, encourages us to think about modifying the structures of incentives that encourage people to orchestrate better outcomes. He suggests that learning more about social science may be instrumental in helping employees create better results. And I would recommend you read his book. It's really good. And probably most of you know Frank from Walmart. So this is Chris, and I'm going to read Chris's story to you in his words. And here it is. I've been sick before, but nothing like the 10 days I was sick with E. coli poisoning. I ate at a popular national burrito chain in Lake Oswego on Friday, October 23, 2015. For several months, I've suffered through a severe physical illness, a slow recovery, and the mental anguish and trauma of events. I began to feel fatigued with muscle aches, stomach pain, and diarrhea early Sunday morning on October 25, 2015. My wife had similar symptoms, so that I thought the illness was a stomach virus or flu. The symptoms began to worsen each day. Fatigue and muscle aches turned into feeling unable to get out of bed and struggling with simple and basic tasks. Stomach aches turned to excruciating pain, like my guts were being pushed and pulled upon. My stomach distended, diarrhea turned bloody. These symptoms worsened in severity, and the effect on me over a course of 5 days was extreme. The absolute worst of the illness was from Wednesday to Friday. The pains in my stomach were so severe and constant that I could lay on my back only, perfectly still. Otherwise, I would feel intense cramping and sharp pain throughout my intestines and stomach. I was unable to eat and only could drink water and sports drinks to give me nutrition. Partly I did this because eating created even greater cramping and pain, as well as the need to go to the bathroom. But because I had hoped that not eating would result in the reduction of pain, but this was not the case, as the bloody diarrhea was constant. Imagine having to go to the bathroom every 15 minutes to try to reduce the severe pain and seeing that your waste is only blood and what appears to be small bits of your intestinal lining. This intensity went on for 48 hours. I began experiencing nausea and a fever of over 100 degrees. I was unable to sleep, and just resting was nearly impossible. I was truly scared for my life. I had never experienced an illness of this magnitude and severity. It was unrelenting and worsened as time went on. I thought I might die. My wife on several occasions assured me that I would not die and it would pass. Eventually, I was so exhausted and mentally fatigued that I sought medical treatment at the urgent care facility. Literally, within 30 seconds of being seen, I was instructed by a nurse that I had to go to the ER, saying my skin looked green. The nurse said that the care that I required exceeded what they could provide in the urgent care center. This was really difficult for me to hear, and I broke down emotionally and could barely walk. I mustered what strength I had left, and my wife took me to the hospital, which was several miles away. I was admitted to the ER, and even with my constant drinking of fluids, I was significantly dehydrated. After receiving a couple of bags of fluids to hydrate me, I provided blood and stool samples for testing. The ER staff were unsure of what was the matter with me and could only provide me with care to decrease the severity of the symptoms. I received nausea medication and medication for the severe stomach pains I was still having through this whole ordeal. With no other care they could provide, I was sent home after 6 hours or so in the emergency room. I was so saddened and upset that even after receiving this care, I was still in such tremendous pain and discomfort. I then spent the next several days dealing with these symptoms and finding small relief through the pain medication. On Saturday, October 31st, I received a call from the ER doctor. She told me that I had tested positive for E. coli and asked me whether I'd eaten at this particular restaurant in the past 2 weeks. I told her that I had, and she informed me of their investigation, which is now widely known. This is the first time I had heard about the problem of E. coli or that it was related to this restaurant. I was shocked and I was sad because I enjoyed meals there so often and considered it my favorite place to eat. She also informed me that I needed to watch my condition because the particular form of bacteria could potentially lead to kidney failure. Hearing this caused a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear that after everything I'd gone through with the illness, I was going to possibly have kidney failure and be permanently disabled or lose my life. It was not until Monday, November 2nd, that my symptoms decreased to the point where I was able to visit my primary care physician for a follow-up. My recovery has been slow and extremely frustrating. I was not able to work for more than 2 weeks after I became sick. I am self-employed. I feared I would lose all of my clients, and I was too sick to pursue others. My wife was transitioning to a new career, and I worried that we would end up with no income at all. Even with the severe physical symptoms abating, I still felt intense fatigue and until recently suffered with stomach discomfort after eating. I still struggle with the mental and emotional effects. I truly feel that what I experienced was torture, or as close as to being torture as I would ever hope to be. I have had persistent anxiety and panic attacks since the first symptoms. I feel stress from the physical symptoms, the slow recovery, and the threat that this incident had to my livelihood. I'm still struggling to enjoy a normal life. The intense emotion I feel around my own mortality makes me wonder whether I will ever feel like myself again, or whether I will have long-term effects from this illness. I recently saw a therapist to try to process this trauma and its outcome. I honestly feel like there was a Chris before and a Chris after, and that they are two different people. I worry about my future, specifically whether I will be healthy enough or able to earn a living and regain my sense of self and happiness. I wish that I could express this to another person, what this experience has been like for me. The physical symptoms are so much more severe than a stomach flu or a food poisoning, but the truly difficult part has been the emotional anguish I've felt. This illness has been traumatic for me, and I still struggle with the effects of it. I wish it would never happen to another person, and I greatly fear having to go through it again when I am older or less healthy. I truly believe it would kill me. I also wish that others would be able to understand how scary it is to feel your life slipping away through illness like this, feeling like your body is out of control. For it all to occur from eating what I thought was clean and healthy food is sad for me, and I hope no one ever has to feel or experience what I went through. So you all know the statistics, right? Each and every year, an estimated 48 million become ill, 128,000 people are hospitalized, and 3,000 people die. And these aren't just statistics. Each statistic represents an individual and impacts not only themselves, but people around them, their family, and their networks. And as a society, we annually memorialize incidents or events in which fewer people have died in a one-time event, and yet over a 10-year period of time, over 30,000 people have died from foodborne illness. And change is difficult, right? So we don't often learn until we risk collapse or actually fall apart, as we heard from Chris's account of his illness. In a moment of crisis, we're presented with a unique opportunity for change. And this idea could stand to be calibrated a bit, as there are moments that are just too painful to activate learning as a person struggles with a deep sense of hopelessness. And there are moments that change just seems impossible. But an analytic perspective without access to emotional content is unlikely to provide the conditions for change, while a link between the head and the heart can initiate transformation. I met Will Daniels, formerly of Earthbound Farms. He was the vice president there, after an emotional presentation he made at a conference to food safety industry leaders. And he talked about a young boy who died from the spinach outbreak. He was working for the implicated company. And he presented the sequence of events very factually that led to and followed the outbreak. But he acknowledged his emotions tearfully as he talked about his children of nearly the same age and the unimaginable loss of a child who had died and the impact of their family. And this link between his head and his heart delivered a presentation that was impactful, emotional, factual, and sincere. So for change to happen, it's important not only to influence one's physical environment, but one's hearts and minds as well. We often see drastic changes in companies and their policies change after they've experienced an outbreak and not before. You've probably witnessed that over the years in companies whose confidence was very high, who really felt immune to having a problem or an issue. And then when something happened, like an outbreak, and when they were implicated and then bankruptcy was upon them, change becomes inevitable. And we challenge everyone to think about the crisis before it happens and to anyone. So this is a family who, a mother was sick with listeria when she was pregnant. And I'm just going to read the slide to you because it's probably hard for you to see back there. But it says, it's been 18 years tomorrow since we were diagnosed with listeria. 2 of us were less than 1 day old. 1 of us had just delivered twins. 2 of us were in the NICU, 1 in the ICU. 1 of us had an APGAR of 4. 1 of us had an APGAR of 1. A temperature couldn't be registered. 1 had a temperature drop so low that organs were beginning to shut down. Seizures, jittery episodes, diarrhea, encephalitis, IV needles coming out of foreheads when no more veins could be found, bruises everywhere, central lines, heart surgery, silent crisis and hoarse voices from intubation, early intervention, projectile vomiting, more diarrhea, trying to keep medications down when everything wanted to come up, praying for milestones to be reached, for healing to happen, wondering about long-term consequences, wondering why it still happens even more than 18 years later, wondering if we will ever forget, wondering how all 3 of us somehow survived when the strain we had kills 30% of those stricken with it. So is it necessary to have a crisis in order to convince others for the need for change? I think I may have gone back. The challenge is to allow ourselves and to allow for conditions where there's sufficient pressure to change, but there's also a safety net in place, right? Because there's a real tension between the pressure to change and the conditions that allow for necessary creativity and flexibility and imagination to get us through a crisis. Businesses that are transparent in their admittance to a problem are often better able to create a change in a safe environment. In other words, yes, we had a problem, as Earthbound Farm did, and what are we going to do to change course? So crisis isn't really necessary, but in reality, catastrophic events often do precede modifications in policy and practice. And creating a head-heart connection during planning and training may deliver a sense of urgency to help individuals remember the why behind food safety. And the consequences for the family that you just heard about were unacceptable. So Mike Taylor, the former Deputy Director of Food and Veterinary Medicine at FDA, who is now a co-chair of the board of Stop Foodborne Illness, said, and I'm quoting, "Stop Foodborne Illness changed the trajectory of my professional life." He recalled when he was administrator of food safety and inspection services at USDA, he met with Nancy Donnelly and Mary Heersink, who told him the story of their personal losses. And he said that the meeting created a profound change for him because it made food safety personal and provided the inspiration and the energy to make things better, not only for him, but for thousands of people in the government and industry who are working hard to make things better. So I'm not an expert on the technicalities of FSNA, but it is a new mindset, and it is one of prevention and accountability, and it is a creation of a food safety system with comprehensive mandates and accountability that emphasizes partnerships and farm-to-table responsibility that is developed through broad coalitions. And finally, until we prepare for a future with a sense of urgency and commitment and fully integrate the why behind food safety, we will merely repeat the errors of the past. It takes courage and true leadership to carry out vision, a future that doesn't deny or divorce itself from the past, but uses it as a way to open up the door to progress. New technology is rampant, and yet we continue to see outbreaks, and we see illnesses and deaths related to foodborne pathogens. But we have seen improvements, And we are better at risk analysis and detection, and I believe that all of those improvements will continue. And I deeply appreciate everything that you guys are doing to take care of food safety. So thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions, reflections for Deirdre.
Thank you for your presentation. I think, so here we are all certainly very concerned about food safety, and we might take that presentation in a different way that the general public would do. My question for you, taking that into account, is we are definitely trying to do something about food safety, to make sure that our products are safe, or the ingredients that we're purchasing are safe. But do you have a perception that if there is something that is being required for the industry to do that might not result necessarily in food safety, or things that food industry or other industries should be doing to avoid incidents such as E. coli in hamburger, for example, from happening that are not being done? Are there people out there looking now to make sure that those situations are not happening? The industry is not doing something that does not result in an increase in food safety, or things that should be happening are not happening just because other sectors of industry are just luckier than the food industry at protecting themselves against regulation.
So I'm not completely sure I understand your question, but I think you're asking, are there more things that can be done, and are people kind of looking out for that? I'm not positive I understand.
Are we doing the right things? And are all the right things being done?
Well, I think we're moving in the right direction for sure. I think, what's interesting is the new technologies, happening every day, and more is happening. I think people are taking, for a lot of different reasons, the consequences very seriously. And I think there are companies out there who have really strong food safety cultures. We still have sometimes a few bad actors, like in the Peanut Corporation, of America. But I think for the most part, people really care. But I think it just takes vigilance, and it takes people like the man at Smithfield Foods that, he said to me, how do I convince an engineer the importance of a crack in the floor? How do I convince them that that is important and that could be the result of someone's life if it's not fixed and repaired? And so I think, having people like all of you and people who work in the food industry really thinking about that daily and, taking that to heart makes a difference.
Good morning. Thanks so much for your presentation. I was just wondering if you could give your opinion on whether or not zero tolerance is either achievable or desirable in food products.
Well, I think it's definitely desirable. I don't know if it's achievable. I hear a lot of people, I go to a lot of conferences around the world, and I always hear people say that it is impossible. I don't know. I mean, pathogens are endemic in our environment, and it's something that we're always going to be struggling against. So I don't know the answer to that question, but it definitely is desirable.
I'm Chuck Ross from the state of Vermont, and appreciated your presentation.
Thank you.
I've been engaged in responding to the FSMA law for since its passage, and it's always been a bit of a struggle to make sure that Congress and the folks who ultimately pass the law support its implementation, not only in concept but in a preparation. This room is filled with a bunch of people that represent a bunch of, even a bigger bunch of people who work on this issue, but who would not be here but for continued support of resources. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if your organization is actively engaged in making sure the congressional funders and the folks in the FDA understand the need that provide the resources to the states so we can actually be the partners that are promised in FSMA?
Yes, we do. We work with the Food Safety Coalition and the Maker Food Safe Coalition, and we work closely with the FDA commissioner and the USDA, usually undersecretary. We have someone new now, but do our best to advocate that there are adequate resources, and of course there aren't. CDC, USDA, FDA all need much more in terms of resources to do their work, but we do our best to make that happen.
Other questions, reflections, comments? Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you, and please excuse me if I don't shake your hand if you meet me. Thank you.